Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Hard Tag, where we get up close and personal with some of footy's biggest names. It's episode 3. We're back after an extended break, and it's the first episode to take place here on the House of Footy YouTube channel. But before we get to our guests, welcome back to my co-host, Jakson Bertoli. How are you, mate?
Good, mate. Good. In a temporary recording setup today, but very happy to be back after a long run.
Brilliant. Now, what we've all been waiting for, our guest for today, he played 246 games, kicked 138 career goals across 3 clubs for 12 years, being Fremantle, North Melbourne and Collingwood, one-time premiership player for the Magpies, and a very important part of that premiership triumph, no less. Of course, I'm speaking about Leigh Brown. Leigh, how are you?
Going well, guys. How are you?
Really
We're
good,
good.
really good. Now, Leigh, we know you've won a granny, had a magnificent 12-year career, but none of that's important right now. The question we always ask first up is, what is your most memorable footy story from when you were a kid?
When I was a kid, I think it's probably playing in premierships, but playing with your mates and being able to enjoy that experience as well. So, um, depending on how young you want to go when you start as a kid, but as a 16-year-old, I got to play in a senior grand final at Hayfield. With David Wojcinski and Adrian Cox, who both went on to play AFL footy as well. So that was a fantastic experience and one that we still speak about. But I was also fortunate enough in my first year of footy as under 11s, and I was 10. I got to play in a grand final and and win the premiership that year too. So I think scattered throughout my footy journey, there's been success, but it's been able to share that with my mates, and we'll probably get to it a bit later on. But Hayfield's been a really big part of my footy journey, and I owe them a lot as a community and also a footy club. And some of my best memories are certainly to do with the footy club at Hayfield.
I absolutely love that. The flags playing with friends, and especially during the first year. The one that comes to mind for me, Brando, is my very first year. I would have been about 7 or 8. My friends just roped me in to play a couple games on the weekend, stick me in a forward pocket because I've never touched a footy before. I've marked a ball right in the goal square. It's my first ever kick of the footy, first shot at goal. I have kicked this ball about as high as the post, and it hasn't made the distance.
We love that story. My initial one was, I always think back to my first goal because I didn't play footy for very long. And I wasn't very good either. But my first goal, I just remember there's a pack of players around me and I throw the ball on my left foot, which I'm a right foot. I don't know how I've done that. And I haven't even seen the ball trickle through and everyone got around me. And it was probably my best moment considering how awful I was at times. But everyone's got a good story. And we
So
love
when
those
you
ones.
so when you say you threw it on your left boot, are you a guide it down with the left hand sort of operator on your opposite side, or a double hander, or you throw it down with the right hand and sort of cross it across the body onto your opposite leg?
Well, I think because of the pressure that was around me, I reckon there were about 3 or 4 guys from both teams. I saw the opening and I've just thrown it on my left foot. And I was facing sort of sideways to the goal as well. And as I said, I didn't even see it go through. So I think I got a bit lucky that day. But you mentioned Hayfield, obviously. What does a day in the life of Leigh Brown look like in 2023, obviously being coach of Hayfield?
Yeah, well, work first and foremost. So I'm a manager of a retirement village, and that entails a few different things. But yeah, it's independent living, so organising activities, daily running of the clubhouse, daily outings, some sales, some stuff to do with construction as well. So it's probably a bit of an all-encompassing sort of role. But first and foremost here, working away and during the week, getting across to footy training a couple of nights a week, and then obviously games on weekends. So I guess getting home to coach the local team is something I've wanted to do for a long time. I want to do it at some stage, and the timing's worked out really well at this point in time. It's also good that I can get home, see mum and dad, and I get a meal on the Tuesday night from mum and dad. Probably one that gives me lunch on Wednesday as well, and then back to the footy club for the Thursday night meal. So there's a couple of added little bonuses in there as well throughout the week to help me get through.
100%. Is going back to Hayfield something that you always foresaw yourself doing, or is that something in recent years that you realised you wanted to get back to doing?
No, I guess we've been fortunate enough as a small town to have a few of us drafted and play AFL footy, and we've always gotten back at some stage, whether that's for a day, a weekend, or an event. grand finals when we could, those sorts of things to take training, help the young kids out. So I think we've been, really fortunate to have those opportunities to get back. So it has been always something I wanted to do. I've played a game or two or three or five, sort of scattered there since I've retired. So, yeah, and it's never crossed my mind to play anywhere else. And I've been involved in coaching since I retired as well. So at all different levels, and it's always been something I want to do, to go back and give back to the footy club that gave me so much and a great start in life and such support coming through. So and like I said before, the timing, where I am with work and that balance, giving me the opportunity to do that, is fitted really well. And we've got a super young team, and after coaching through the talent pathway, it just fits really well at this point in time. So it's going pretty well.
For sure. So before we get into the big, magnificent AFL career that you had, we've got a couple of fun ones here. So in my research on Wikipedia, there are 3 nicknames listed on your Wikipedia page. Now, which of these were the most commonly used, if at all? You've got the Anvil, the Freight Train, and Big Bad Leroy Brown. Do you have any stories attached to those 3 nicknames?
The Anvil happened in WA, so in Perth. I think it was Dennis Cometti. I was just bashing and crashing one day, and it probably happened week after week, and that's where it really came from. And I think that one's probably only really grown legs when your mates are taking a bit of mickey out of you, or some of the real diehard fans from Fremantle. I think they might have made a T-shirt here and there as well. So, none of them really stuck in terms of getting called day by day. I get Leroy a little bit, but not Big Bad Leroy. Obviously, the song goes with that as well. So, I haven't heard the Freight Train, so that's a new one for me.
Interesting.
Big Bad Leroy Brown might be one of my favourite nicknames I've ever seen.
Well, the song, you got to have the song playing in the background as well. And
that's very true.
In the song, he's a 6'4" guy, which sits pretty well. I'm not sure about the rest of the content of the song, but a couple of things in there line up.
It's a fun one. Also, in prep for the pod, a mate of ours noticed that in many of the clips, and we'll talk about some of the clips and your highlights later, but you have your socks pulled up in an awful amount of these clips. Was this an intentional thing? Were you always a socks up operator?
No, I wasn't. No, I would say majority of those are maybe Collingwood ones. Are they?
Yeah, the Collingwood ones.
I think I went through just a stage there where I pulled them up, and I must have played well for a week, and it worked, and I stuck with it for a while. But the other thing is the socks. It's changed now. They got socks that are cut off, and you can have shorter ones. Back in our day, you weren't allowed to. So I know at North Melbourne, Brent Harvey and myself used to get a section of our sock cut out and sewn up. But then we got a couple of warnings for that. So we had to stick with the long ones, and that's probably where it came from. But not on purpose. It must have been after a good performance here or there that I got a little bit superstitious for a while.
Nothing wrong with a bit of superstition in footy. To dive into it all now, mate, growing up in Hayfield, how was it footy? Is it a town that just lives and breathes footy, or how'd you get into it? Were there any players you looked up to in the league? How did it all start for you?
Yeah, well, we're fortunate enough that our town's probably known for timber, being a timber town, so a lot of mills, but also our sporting. It's a sporting community, a sporting town. So when I grew up, I played footy not as soon as I could. We didn't have Auskick, so I used to kick the ball out in the road with my mates, and the under-11s coach ran past. He was the local legend. He played over 400 games, and I just said, how do I get involved? He said, come down to training, just make sure you keep practicing both sides of your body. So that's really how it started, and didn't look back from there. But played footy in winter, cricket in summer, basketball up until probably 14 or 15, and then dropped away from that and just focused on the footy mainly, but a little bit of cricket in the winter. So, it's more just because we're a sporting town, I guess, in Hayfield, that's where it grew, and tried my hand at everything, and even fielded in a couple of games of tennis here and there when I was too old for junior cricket, and the age groups align better with tennis. So, just whatever we could do, riding bikes, playing cricket in the backyard, making our own cricket pitches, setting up your goals, playing all the time at primary school or those sorts of things as well. So it was a great breeding ground, a great place to practice our skills and hone them. And yeah, it's been a very good breeding ground for successful AFL footballers.
Yeah, absolutely. You touched on like you played a bit of basketball until about 14, 15. Was that when it sort of all switched for you and you realised that you could go quite a way in footy and you had a few pathways that open to you?
No, it was probably a couple of years later. It probably wasn't until I was um, probably top age under 15 in terms of footy. So probably got a bit of a feel then that I was okay. And then, yeah, definitely the next year, I didn't expect to play much at all at Gippsland Power as an under 16, and I got picked round one, and it was nearly like it was a bit of a surprise. And then went away. I think I was in the best players first week, and didn't really look back from there. So I think once I was playing that couple of grades up in that level of competition, you start to think, okay, well, this is something that maybe could go further. You always dream about it, as we all did as kids, no matter what sport or profession you want to get into. Yeah, and then once Vic Country under 16s rolled around and performed reasonably well there, it started to become a bit more real, and yeah, it sort of grew legs a bit from there.
Very good. And obviously playing into the Gippsland Power. Do you remember how you ended up down there on who were some of your biggest mentors going through that system at that time?
Yeah, I missed out as a bottom major for the under 15 schoolboys, which I'd been playing good junior footy, so that was a bit of a kick in the bum. So yeah, Barry Anderson then selected me the following year, and I performed reasonably well. So and then from there, it was really Peter Francis as the coach of Gippsland Power, and oversaw the whole program, and he's been fantastic for me the whole way through. So him as a coach was hard but fair. Some of the boys that we catch up from time to time, they would probably describe me as the serious one when we played and came through. And maybe, I think even Bob Murphy said I was a bit of a father figure as a 17-year-old to the group. So that shows probably where my mindset was and how I took it. And I think that worked well with Pete and the way he coached. And he was fantastic for us. We went through to a grand final in 1999 and just missed out on winning that. And the old Paran Dragons got us on the day, which was disappointing. But to play grand final day on the MCG back in the old days was fantastic. So, in terms of juniors at Hayfield, a couple of guys were, Pat Coleman, who I mentioned before, was my first junior coach, and John Tyquin, who took us under their wings really and taught us and helped us off in the off season to get better and those sorts of things. But as soon as I got in the Gippsland Power program, it was Peter Francis, and I was fortunate enough to coach at Gippsland after I retired, and Pete was still the footy manager, and so we've got a great relationship, and he's been unbelievable to me for a very, very long time.
Yeah, just on Peter Francis there, that's what I was going to ask. Was he someone who sort of helped you a lot through your journey? And we'll talk about Gippsland Power later, but through your journey coaching the club, is he someone who helped you a lot there?
Oh yeah. Obviously, Pete's a wealth of experience, and had a really successful footy career himself. But his time at Gippsland Power, like he's the godfather of football in Gippsland in terms of the pathway and the effort and the work rate and the commitment that he's shown to all facets of junior footy and the pathway is something that I guess we've all learnt off and hopefully taken a little bit away from that and added to our own ways and the way we go about coaching. But yeah, he's a great mentor for me when I was coaching Gippsland Power, and I'd had a little bit of a taste at Melbourne as an assistant coach the 2 years previously, but yeah, I certainly learned a lot, particularly about junior development and the way we can help local footballers and junior footballers, both boys and girls, and grow that system. And yeah, he certainly helped shape me as a footy coach.
Just we'll obviously touch on coaching a bit later, but you just said that's helped you shape you as a coach. Do you think your coaching style has helped being molded by a lot of the different coaches you played under? You're obviously getting a lot of different experience under different coaches.
Yeah, good or bad, I guess. first 3 years at Fremantle, I had 3 different coaches, and then went to North Melbourne, just the one with Danny Laidley, and obviously at Collingwood with Mick Malthouse. So, but also had some fantastic assistants around them to learn from. Mark Neild was fantastic. Brad Scott, sorry. Nathan Buckley was around for a little bit. Craig McRae at Collingwood as well as a development coach. So you start to see little bits and pieces from all of them, and you try and take the bits that you think you can harness and use really well to your own advantage while adding to your own skill set. So, yeah, it's been, it was 12 years of a journey, but I certainly learned a lot from each of those guys. And, hopefully I've taken little bits of pieces from each of them to help me be a better coach.
Yeah, very nice. While we're speaking of coaches, although you didn't, you didn't get the Chockies and Attack Cup in '99. You got the coaches award, so you obviously played some decent footy. I think we may have undersold that earlier. What was it like to be recognised with an award like that? Coming into your draft year
there. You probably look back on it now more fondly. At the time, I think it was. They presented sort of the week before the grand final and, or the lead up to the finals at least. And at that stage, you're worrying about the draft and what that looks like. At that stage, I probably knew I was going to go somewhere. It was a matter of where and what that looked like. But you're also juggling year 12, still wanted to play good footy and finish off the year really well. You had draft combine and those sorts of things coming up as well. So probably didn't give it the best amount of thought, I guess, in terms of when it happened. But when you look back now, it's obviously fantastic award to receive and achieve. But at that stage, you're worrying about taking the next step and trying to do everything right in the lead up to draft camp and then obviously the draft itself.
Yeah, absolutely. You said you were pretty confident you were going to go somewhere. And obviously it ended up being Fremantle. But did you have any other clubs circle you, or what did you think was going to happen on draft night there?
I thought by the time you get to draft night, if you're going to go in the first first 10, I reckon you sort of got a fair idea where you can end up. I didn't think I was going to go past 6 or 7, so I knew I was going to go reasonably early. The conversations that I'd had at that stage, so I was comfortable going anywhere. Like we've spoken about Hayfield before, but Hayfield's over 2 hours out of Melbourne, so Hayfield don't have an AFL footy team, so I was moving no matter what. So I didn't care if it was WA, Queensland, South Australia, into Melbourne, into the Big Smoke, or down to Geelong. Like I was ready to go. So at that stage, I probably thought I'd end up at Fremantle, but I think Collingwood and Geelong had the picks after that, and there was part of me that the fantasy or the dream of playing with one of your best mates at Geelong was there, but I thought I'd go before that. So I was really pleased to go to Fremantle and start my journey there.
Yeah. Just before we talk about you going to Fremantle, there's a element today of kids getting drafted and they go interstate and then often they come home very quickly. What are your thoughts on that? Obviously, there's a big story now about Harley Reid. What do you think about that stuff?
I think if you're not willing to go interstate, and this will be quite harsh, I don't think you should be allowed in the draft. I think you put your name in the open draft, and where you get selected is where you get selected. I'm with some of the commentators around, and some of the people who know more than I certainly do. But I think those guys, particularly high in the draft, whether it's just the first round or the second round, their contract needs to be a bit longer. And the only way that they can be traded out is by the club initiating it, not the player. So, I'd love to see Harley Reid go to Western Australia, go to West Coast, love his time there, turn the footy club around and make them a real powerhouse on the field as they are off the field at the moment and do that. I just think there's a lot of players around that are looking for an easier option. And unfortunately, AFL footy, there is no easy option. And we've all seen it. We've seen kids move, and sometimes it's worked, and sometimes it hasn't. And you always used to say, Pete and I will sit there and have a few conversations. The grass isn't always greener on the other side of the fence. Sometimes it's better to know what you know. And yeah, I think those kids, picking and choosing. I don't personally like it. I'm quite strong that you go and fight it out, and then. Okay, people will be watching this or listen to me speak before and have the same view. They'll say, "Well, you left Fremantle after 3 years," but that wasn't my choice. At the end of the day, I've got put up for trade. I just signed a 3-year deal. I was 1 year into a 3-year deal. I wanted to stay. I wanted to help turn the place around with guys like Matthew Pavlich and Paul Hazelby and the Longmuir brothers and Troy Cook, etc., etc., etc. We got a new coach in Chris Conley. He had a different direction. At the end, I got the phone call and say the deal's done. All we have to do is say yes. So I can see where people might think that, I'm having both sides of the fence, but I'm not. I would have stayed at Fremantle and fought it out as long as I could and tried to turn the place around. But yeah, I think we got to be strong on these young kids to be at those clubs, particularly when you draft them in the first or second round, to be there a bit longer and fight it out and really help that footy club.
100%. And to Harley's credit, he's a superstar, and hopefully he goes over to the West and does a good job over there. But speaking of the West, you were drafted pick 5 in the 99 draft alongside Hazelby and Pavlich. You were all top 5 picks. What was it like coming up with them, especially as a trio of players who went in the top 5?
Yeah, it was fun. It was exciting. We're a very young footy club at that stage, only been in the competition for only less than 10 years. So a real baby in terms of a footy club and what it was producing and what we're doing at AFL level. So we had some great leaders in Adrian Fletcher and Sean McManus, Ash Prescott, these sorts of guys. But we had some out and out superstars too. Like we got to play with Tony Modger and Clive Waterhouse. So there's a bit of that razzle dazzle factor as well. Jeff Farmer, another one with that. So yeah, we wanted to stick together and we all re-signed. We all had the intention to stay together and turn the footy club around. Unfortunately, the club didn't have the same view for me, but I loved my 3 years there. I started down back. I had some good weeks, had some amazing jobs. Like I still reflect on, playing on Matty Lloyd and Matthew Richardson and Ben Graham and all the great full forwards at that time in 2000. And then next game you're one out, not in the forward 50, but in the front half of the ground. I think they cleared out the whole front half of the ground for me to play on Anthony Koutafidis. So I don't recommend that for anyone. I think I did okay. I'm going to say I did okay, but he's a very good player, one of the best I ever played on. So I had some unbelievable experiences as a key back. Some good days, some rough days where I had bags kicked on me, but the second year I moved around a little bit. It's still mainly key back, and then third year once Chris came in, I was probably played more forward than I did back in that third year, and that's where I was sort of trying to find where I fitted under his new regime and his leadership. And in the end, as we know now, I didn't, and they traded me out, and the rest is history in terms of my time at Freo.
Well, you said that obviously when Chris came in, he shuffled you around. Was there any conversation to try with him to try keep you back if that's where you wanted to play, or was it just he wanted you forward and it didn't quite work out in the end?
We had that conversation, but that was also the time where Matty Pavlich went and played back. And Luke McFarlane was there as well. Trent Corrode was there. So he played a little bit of forward, a little bit back. Anthony Grover was coming through. So it was a pretty young-ish back line. We did have that conversation, but I also backed myself in to be able to play that role in front of the ball too. I did play a little bit of ruck here and there, but not as much as I did in the latter half of my career. So, I've probably, whether it's confidence or a bit of arrogance in yourself, but you back yourself in to play at that level, no matter what position. And I thought I played some decent footy, but obviously not to their plans, and that's fine. We move on, and the next year I'm at North Melbourne.
Exactly right. Yeah. So you do end up back to North Melbourne. You end up back in Victoria. What's that move like coming back home essentially after the 3 year stint in the West?
Yeah, well, like I said before, it wasn't really necessarily coming home because home's still 2.5 hours away. So
Yeah.
I didn't see it as coming home. I just saw it as coming across to a new footy club with an opportunity where, um, there's probably going to be more opportunities for me to play at senior level from my discussions with the two coaches. So for me, it was a no-brainer. Um, yeah, and I started off probably down back, and over my time at North Melbourne, I probably moved around a lot in terms of back, forward, ruck. Played some midfield at times as well, so there was a variety of positions there, and yeah, it was fantastic to come back and be involved in the footy scene in Melbourne, if you like, and the landscape of this is where footy's played, and the big games are in Melbourne. All the big clubs are in Melbourne and all those sorts of things, and you get to see the hype that's around the city, when footy season's in full flight. So I enjoyed that part of it. It just, it was 6 years at North Melbourne, and I didn't see it as coming back, and I'm really strong on that. I don't want to be seen to have bailed out of Fremantle because that certainly wasn't the case. I was there for the long haul, and the club made a decision, and we roll forward, and I get my next opportunity at North Melbourne.
100%. You mentioned how you were moved around a bit at North Melbourne. We'll talk about how you were seen as a bit of a utility at Collingwood later. But at North Melbourne, what did you think your best position was in those days?
I still think my best position's down back. So
Mhm.
whether that's centre half back or fullback. Yeah, so I had some good games there, but the consistency wasn't there, and I can recognise that, and big enough to know that. So, and once again, we probably weren't as successful as we wanted to be at North Melbourne, and there were some guys thrown around in different positions. So Drew Petrie started as a forward, but spent a lot of time back later in his time there. Um, so yeah, Lee Colbert was really good early, and then obviously he retired out of there. So Shannon Watt was a mainstay down back with his speed and power and playing on some of those key forwards. So yeah, there's different opportunities. I had some really good games forward as well. I think I kicked 6 against Adelaide round one of the years, and I was up and about. Kicked 2, I think, the following week, and then the third week, round 3, I was back to centre half back. So that probably gives you a bit of a key or a bit of an insight of being moved around, which sometimes can be hard to find that consistency. And I think at the time, I didn't use that as an excuse. But once I got to Collingwood and settled down a little bit more in a role, I noticed how much of a bigger difference knowing what I was doing week in, week out made. And that allowed me to play my best footy, I think, and most consistent footy, which was really important.
Yeah, for sure. Just on that journey at the Roos, obviously, barring 2005, where you did come fifth and play that elimination final, there were some tough finishes in there initially. Obviously, a couple of 10th place finishes, a 14th place finish. Did you always see it progressing to a point where you'd be able to compete, even if it were just for that 1 year where you made the prelim?
Yeah, we did. We thought we had a really good team and a good group of older guys around. Some good young talent coming through to complement that. When you're talking Archer, Stevens, Grant, Simpson, Brady Rawlings become a veteran really quickly. Lee Colbert was a leader. Tav Rocker, some real experience around that group. So whether we underperformed, quite possibly at times, but when you step away from that environment as well and you look back, we're doing it in the old social club in terms of lifting weights. There was times where you thought if you drop the barbell after doing a couple of deadlifts that the bar might actually go through the floor um, and fall apart. So yeah, North Melbourne, we were a long way behind in terms of facilities and things they had at their fingertips, but we built and learnt, I guess, and tried to carry that on to the next group. That we learned it off Archer and Stevens and Simpson and these guys. You try and pass it on to the next group as they come through, but it back against the walls. It's us against them. We don't need all these big shiny stuff. We can do it through hard work and working together and that shin bone of spirit that we hear about, all the time now. So yeah, we went about it in different ways. I thought the way the club kept the past players involved and kept us learning about the history and introducing guys that wore our numbers before us. So, I had to introduce Steve McCann to the group and, talk about him. And, they joined us for lunch and a training session. And Jimmy Cracker was out there one day and he actually turned it on. I thought he could have kept playing the way he was moving around that day, but he did a hemi late in the session. But, yeah, but no, we had some great times and, we're really strong and connected on and off the field. Unfortunately, didn't transfer into great results, but there's a couple of final series in there and those sorts of things. But we certainly were a tight group.
Yeah, just speaking to you, mate, you seem like a guy who respects putting in the hard work and building something from the ground up and then breaking through the top. So when you guys made that prelim in 2007, I guess how rewarding was that to have put in all those hard yards and then ended up in as far as you did?
Yeah, it was rewarding, except I wasn't playing. I got dropped after the first week of the finals that year. Yeah, so it was great to see the club, burst through. We're playing some really good footy. I think we lost that first final against Geelong by near on 100 points, or it was at least close to 100. Won the second week against Hawthorn, and then, prelim final against Port Adelaide over there, we lost again. So, I'd sort of got a little bit out of favour from there. We talked about being traded at the end of 2007. There wasn't a whole lot on offer at that stage. Decided to wipe the slate clean, if you like, and crack in again. And in 2008, I probably played my least amount of AFL games in a season. Spent a fair bit of time at Werribee, which was good and bad. And I wouldn't say I was completely hating footy or disliking it. I was struggling to find the enjoyment in it all the time. And I actually had to strip it right back. And being at Werribee helped me do that. Being able to get back to being physical and a bit of a nuisance, if you like, and just annoying. I found that that's one of the things I really enjoyed when playing footy, like just bumping into people and being physical and aggressive. But also got back to, I enjoyed that everyone got together after the game. So going up to the social club, whether that's for a beer for some people or a soft drink or whatever it might be, but just spending that little bit of time. And I found that really kicked me back into gear. And when I got delisted at the end of 2008, I still had a passion to keep going. I think if I didn't find that in that second half of 2008, I probably would have given it away. And I'm not sure what would have happened in terms of footy then, but I rekindled that passion through that year, and Werribee was a big part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Brino and I were talking about it before this pod that was you only played 9 games in 2008. That's the lowest bar 2010 when you played 19. So incredible longevity. You played so many games so consistently. When you got to 2008 and got delisted, I guess, what was the feeling like that? Like, how quickly did you get calls from other clubs? Did you know you were going to go in that draft? What was that period like?
It was a little frustrating. I didn't know what was going to go on. And then I'm probably trying to work out, okay, if I don't get picked up again, what is the next step? In terms of work, in terms of footy, in terms of how I set myself up going forward. So, going back a little bit, when I got traded from Fremantle, I was overseas on a holiday. And then when I got the call and delisted from Collingwood, I was overseas as well. So I sort of said to myself, maybe I shouldn't go away at the end of the year. But I was in New York. They knew that I was coming home. I didn't have a contract at that stage, but was going to start pre-season with the hope of maybe getting another one because my form in the VFL had been pretty good. So they called me, delisted. So I extended my holiday for a little bit. And Jeff Walsh, who had been the footy manager at North Melbourne, it was at Collingwood at that time. So when I was flying back between New York and LA, I had a missed call from Jeff. I called him back. We organised to catch up when I got back. And went in and met with Collingwood. I don't know if my manager took any calls from any other clubs. I certainly don't remember any off the top of my head. So literally went into Collingwood, met with Jeff, met with Mick as well. They said, this is a role that we could see you playing. This is where you fit into our list profile in terms of height, age. There's a gap there, where you'd fit in quite nicely. You got 2 weeks to prove to us, you can do that. And the kicker was, Mick said, most of us are going to Arizona on our training camp. So you're back here with just a group of guys. So I think there was Leon Davis, Anthony Rocker, Simon Prestigiacomo, and a couple other young guys. And we trained together for 2 weeks. And the boys came back, and the draft was pretty much the next Sunday. And to this day, I had some good days on the footy field and some good quarters, some good halves, all those sorts of things. But to this day, I think we all understand and appreciate how good a player Simon Prestigiacomo was. To this day, I think I had the best 10 minutes of my footy career on a training track with Luke Beveridge, as he was the player development. He stayed back with us when the other guys went back or went over to Flagstaff in Arizona for their training camp. I had 10 minutes where I reckon, and maybe it wasn't like this, but this is what it felt like. Like I just clunked everything. It was me versus Presti. They're just kicking them up 1v1, and I felt like I clunked everything. And, whether that was a turning point or they'd already made their decision, but I felt like that sort of 10-minute block went a long way to getting me on the list and getting drafted, a couple of days later.
How often do you let him hear about that, demolishing him on the training track?
Nah, try not to. No, not too many people. It was only the training tracks. That's what he'd say to me. But he's a very humble man, Presti, and unbelievable player and sacrificed a lot for our group, as we all know. But it was just one of those days where everything stuck, and I don't know if Presti might have had an off day, or he wasn't quite going as hard as I was, or whatever it might have been. But it all seemed to fall in line for that 10-15 minute period.
100%. So obviously we talked before about how you were praised for your ability to play different key roles, key positions. Did you feel like your time at Collingwood, that's where that was most effective? And is that something that Mick made a point of deploying you in that role, I guess?
I think Mick settled me down the most. In terms of I was a forward that helped Joels in the ruck, particularly 2010, 2011. 2009, I still played a little bit of back, bit of forward, bit of ruck here and there. So I think once I settled completely down and like I said earlier, I pretty much knew, driving to the game or, in the lead up, what my role was going to be. There was times where that varied a little bit. I might have played some defensive roles on like a Dustin Fletcher or a Matty Scarlett or all those sorts of guys, but I knew I was going to play forward and then I was going to go in the ruck and help out Joels there. And I think that settled me and gave me a bit more balance and I learned, how to prepare and get better. Tarkin Lockyer was like, I think he was unbelievable for me, and I'm not sure if he knows it. I've told him a few times that the way he went about it, like he was an early riser. I'm an early riser, so he'd be first at the club, and he was fit. And a few of us, I don't think we're allowed to call it Fat Club anymore, but a few of us were in Fat Club because our skinnies were over 50. And the players these days, they don't even call it Fat Club, and I don't think they're allowed to do skinnies and all that sort of stuff. But back in the good old days, if your skinnies were over 50, you're trying to get them down a little bit more. And so he was always in the altitude room, even though he was fit as a fiddle and ripped to the bone. So I'd get in there with him, and we'd watch a movie or just talk or whatever it might be. It might be a walk around the tan, those sorts of things. But being able to do those extras with someone and he's a little bit serious too, or he's much more serious than me. But we got along on that baseline as well of both sort of not being too silly, but being serious enough. And he certainly helped me and guided me and gave me some good insight, even though I was 9 or 10 years into my AFL career. So to still be able to learn and grow off those sorts of guys was was really good, and yeah, he certainly helped me. But settling down into position was a big factor. But I also knew that if there was an injury, I was one move away from going down back and helping out down there too.
100%. What was it like working under Mick at Collingwood? Obviously, such a successful coach who won flags previously at West Coast and eventually delivered one at Collingwood too. But what was it like to learn from such a great footballing mind?
Really good. So, a lot of my coaching philosophies sort of come forward to me during those times there, whether it's from Mick, and he delegated really well and gave a lot of responsibility to his assistant coaches. So, whether that's Brad Scott, Mark Neal, Scotty Waters, Bevo, Bucks, those sorts of guys. We certainly had full trust in those assistant coaches. So it was good to see that. But Mick was set in his ways, but he also gave us a bit of freedom to play our way. So I liken it to there's a lot of characters and flashy footballers and those sorts of things at Collingwood at that time, and we had an exceptionally talented team. Mick allowed us to go off the train tracks if you liked, but he always made sure that we ended up back on them. So, whether it was a Dale Thomas or a Dane Swan and Alan Didak, they've got the license, if you like, to go off track for a little bit, but as long as they come back in when it's needed, the ability to give the individual, their chance to flourish and use their flair and those sorts of things was really strong. And I think you saw that in the footy we played. So it was an environment where it was a bit more individualised than what I'd seen before in terms of the program. And Mick trusted the players, and that's built over a long period of time. So the players that come before me getting there, it certainly put that in place. But there's guys like Tarkin Lockyer and Shane O'Brien and Presty and and then Nick Maxwell and Nathan Brown and Josh Fraser and these sorts of guys that have set it up over a long period of time that by the time that the rest of us get there, we fall into line and understand that you work hard when you need to work hard, but also have that balance where you can relax and enjoy yourself as well. And Mick was big on that. And from an outsider's point of view, Mick looks quite serious, and which he is, and you wouldn't want to get on his bad side, but he also had a jovial side in there as well, and interacted with the group really well.
You talk about how Mick would, allowed the individuality and let the boys play up and, do things as long as the results came on field. Can you give us any insight into the boys in the Rat Pack and how that everything was going on in there?
Yeah, well, I guess there's probably plenty of examples, but the one that sums up is I can't remember, it must have been 2010. It could have been 2009. It's definitely it happened in one of those 2 years. But Nick Maxwell as the captain got up the front and said, we're leading into finals. We need to just tailor it in a little bit and make sure we're all looking after ourselves. And one of the group, I can't remember who it was, stuck his hand up and said, "We're going so well. Why would we change anything? Let's just keep doing what we're doing." Those boys, you knew that they enjoyed, spending time socially together and maybe a beer here and there or getting out and those sorts of things. But it allowed guys, if you wanted to go, you knew that, you had someone to have a beer with, or if you wanted to stay in or whatever it did. So I reckon they added a real balance to the group. And we all understood. And the Rat Pack, they pump up their Rat Pack, don't they? And I think off field, the commentators have as well. But at the end of the day, they haven't done too much. Like they stick together, they enjoy a good time hanging out together, having a beer and relaxing. And that allowed them to play some really good footy. And the results say that they did. And once again, that's the way Mick just let the individuals go. So once you're at the club, you work hard. If you have a beer over the weekend, make sure you're on the training track on Monday and working hard, and make sure we're all pulling in the right direction. So, and that was certainly the case. And those boys led that from the front.
100%. Back to your footy. You had a couple of outstanding individual moments in finals in your Collingwood career. Two goals stick out in particular, and I know you'll remember them. 2009 semi-final against Adelaide, scores tied up. You mark the ball on the 50 and you launch it, absolutely launch a bomb, which goes through and ultimately proves crucial as you win by 5 points. And then there's the 2010 preliminary final, which I know you'll remember much more fondly, the bouncer. What are your thoughts on those goals? What do you remember your feelings being at the time, given they proved so important in the end?
Yeah, the Adelaide one probably doesn't stick as well with me because it doesn't get brought up as much. But then now, once you mention it, you realise it was a big moment. I thought I could carry the distance, so yeah, I went back. I actually hadn't been kicking that straight all year, so there was probably a little bit of pressure on, and yeah, I struck it pretty well, and it just got across the line. So I knew it was a big moment in the game. It was nice to grab that opportunity. The prelim one where it bounced sideways. Yeah, it doesn't matter where I go. Everyone's seen it. Everyone remembers it. Even the boys now that I'm coaching, they bring it up from time to time, or will send their own video of it or whatever they're doing when they're watching it. So I see it as a form of flattery, if you like, that they're still watching me. What is it? 13 years later, and having a look at that. But maybe they also need to get a life and get out a little bit more. But yeah. Once I kicked it, I was just trying to get territory. I picked it up clean, tried to get territory, just tried to launch into it as best I could. And yeah, it was going towards the boundary. It was going towards that behind post. And yeah, next moment it turned sideways and went through. And I remember Darren Milburn turning to me and said, "I think it's your night tonight." Like, in terms of Collingwood, not mine personally, but yeah, he's just saying, I think it's your night tonight, you boys." And yeah, we'd had a really good start to the game. Obviously, kicked a fair few goals in that first quarter and set it up from there. So, yeah, that one sticks with me a little bit more because it gets brought up a lot more often.
It's a huge moment in a prelim. Then you have not only the week after, but the week after that as well. The drawn grand final. Can you talk us through? I guess the feelings when that siren goes, whether you should have played extra time, whether you're happy to come back the next week, and just everything that surrounded that draw.
Yeah, firstly, I think we're all a little bit stunned in terms of we didn't know what the exact ruling was. So we all probably had a good idea that we had to come back and do it all again, but we weren't 100% certain. And it's a little bit different grand final day because you're going to the function afterwards. So you don't tend to driven the car in. You're catching the bus to the function straight from the ground. You got your bag of fruit with you too to put the suit on after the game and go straight to the function. So then we went to go back into the change rooms, and the change rooms had flooded. So all our gear had moved into the old change room. So that was another, little element to add to it as well. But I think Mick summed it up really well and really quickly. Nick Maxwell was really strong in that transition as well, but they made the decision to still go to the function, still have the night together. Have a beer if you want to have a beer, but get home and relax and get yourself ready for the following week. But Mick was really clear on this is half time now, so next week's your next half. Let's go and prepare. The 2 weeks felt completely different. I could have told you, I reckon, about Tuesday or Wednesday that we were a good chance to win. It just felt different. The group had a different vibe about it. The week into the grand final proper, if you like, or the first week, there's a lot more media. There's so many more fans around the training track, the grand final parade, all those sorts of things that are added into your week. The next week just felt like a normal game, except it was another grand final. There wasn't as many people at training. There was no parade. It just felt normal. It felt right. And yeah, from early in the week, it just felt like we had a really good handle on what was happening. And the group was in a good space. And yeah, history says once again that we performed and recovered really well, and we were able to back it up and have a really good second grand final.
It's easy to say in hindsight, but do you think the draw made the group hungrier and made that helped make that second week a lot more, I guess, cruisy and made it feel like a normal week?
I don't think hungry is the right term. I think it allowed us to get back to where we play our best footy, and that was a bit more relaxed. And um, you know, the group loved big games and big finals, and playing against the rivals and all those sorts of things. But it just felt like that week that the shackles are off and we could go and play footy. That's how it felt. And it probably looked like that too, the way we performed in the second week. So, yeah, it's disappointing we couldn't get it done in the first week, but we had that second opportunity and we go back and away we go. But yeah, I think you're playing in a grand final. I don't think hungry is the right word, but yeah, there's certainly added motivation to go and finish it and finish off what had been a really good year.
Absolutely. Then you get the flag, mate. You win the grand final. What's every player describes it differently. What was that feeling like for you? The culmination of a life's dream.
Yeah, well, a long journey to get there, firstly, and fortunate enough to be right place, right time, and then playing a role that suited me, and I was able to contribute to the team. And I don't sit here and say I was ever a great player or a superstar or anything like that. I played a role, and I played a role that I think was important to help Joel's in the ruck and give him enough spell and allow us to compete in the middle during that period of time, but also to help out Trav and Travis Cloak and Chris Dawes in the forward line from a tools point of view and contribute where I needed to. So a lot of my stuff was pressure and tackles and being aggressive and hitting and hunting bodies and those sorts of things to create some space and be a nuisance if you like and talk a little bit of talk a bit of rubbish to opposition players and all that sort of stuff. And in the end, I really loved that. Like I wasn't concerned about getting a kick because that wasn't anything that we really spoke about in terms of a coaching group. It was about my pressure and playing my role and possessions and those sorts of things weren't a piece of it. But I'd like to hit the scoreboard, and I did consistently, hit a goal a game or whatever it was over those 2 years. But it was never about you have to go out and get 20 possessions and kick 4 or 5 goals. It was about going out and playing your role in the team, which I think I enjoyed that black and white element of it. So the grand final I remember, and it's probably the last time we've all been together as a group, which in a way it's nice to remember it that way. In another way, in another sense, I guess it's a bit sad we haven't all just been together. There's always been other people there or whatnot, but being out in the MCG with the cup in the middle of the circle and just the 22 guys that played, all talking a little bit about their journey and what it meant to get to that point and some of the stuff we've been through individually and share that with the group. Like it was really powerful and really strong. So that sits with me probably the most from the day itself even. And just being able to share that with the other 20, 21 guys. And we catch up regularly and not everyone can get there due to their circumstances, where they're at life and where they're living and all that sort of thing. But yeah, it's certainly you get there and people say, you get a premiership hangover. I'm not sure that's true. You want another one. Like you just want to go again. And we're really close the following year in 2011. The only team we lost to all year was Geelong, and they beat us 3 times, I'm pretty sure. You just want another one. You want to work hard and get there. And the group was hungry, and we got to another grand final. Unfortunately, we didn't get it done. And I'd announced my retirement before that, so it would have been a fantastic fairy tale way to go out. I got to play a grand final against one of my best mates, Dave Wojcinski, who was at Geelong. A really strong memory in 2011. My last game, it's a grand final, and he was the first one to come over and commiserate really for us losing and them getting the win. But you don't get those opportunities. So that's right up there with. I know we lost, but for me, as a memory from 2 kids growing up in Hayfield to playing against each other in a grand final, and the biggest day of the year, like that sits with me really strongly as well. And you don't get many opportunities to play grand finals at that level, and I appreciated both of them and all 3 of them really, because we had the draw and the rematch. But yeah, you'd love to do that every year if you could.
100%. Those are all great memories to have, especially at one of the biggest clubs in the land. One more memory that I want to ask you about, potentially the greatest quarter you've ever played, round 6, 2011 against the Bulldogs. You probably had, you were probably the reason that Collingwood came away with such a big win in the end. 4 of the 8 goals in the last quarter were off your boot, including a beautiful one from the pocket that you bounced in. What are your memories of that quarter and the way that Collingwood took out the win there?
Yeah, memories are that we're down and needed to have a good last quarter. We'd played some decent footy before that, leading into it, but probably were a little bit off in the first 3 quarters from where we were at. Um, and when we played Western Bulldogs, remembering Brian Lake, or I'm not sure if he was Brian Harris then, but I normally had a role to play on him because he would intercept and set up their defence. So I actually played a defensive role on Brian all night, and it was late that I was able to cash in and have a quarter. So yeah, 4 goals. I got lucky, fair to say, but yeah, a couple of those kicks were good kicks too. It was wet and slippery, so all I had to do was snap it on line and it rolled through. Maxi put on a good shepherd. Might have been stealing the goal square. Who let it go? He could have grabbed it and kicked it as well. But yeah, it's a nice quarter to kick for in the quarter, and it did feel good afterwards. And yeah, you just want to contribute, and if you can have a positive impact on the result of the game, that obviously is a huge bonus. And to be able to stand up when we needed to, as a team and a group, yeah, it's good because some weeks, I'd get that third, or most weeks I get that third defender as a tall because Trav and Chris Stores would take the best 2 defenders. So I was just cruising around either playing a role on somebody or taking the third defender. So it worked out quite well for me. And yeah, I was pretty lucky that night.
100%. And obviously, at the end of that season, you packed it in and retired at 29 years old. Talk us through the rationale you had for that decision at that time, especially given you were probably a bit younger than most players at that point.
Yep. For me, it made sense. I'd been doing a lot of coaching stuff in the previous 2 years. So there was some opportunities with that as well that could pop up in the future. And I was really comfortable with that. I didn't think I could go through another preseason or another full year of doing all the little things that I needed to do to play my role. Like, I'm not talking about starring, I'm just talking about playing a role. So, I didn't really want to do the ice bars. I didn't really want, those sessions down in the beach. I didn't really want to be, doing all that running in the preseason, all that sort of thing. So for me, it was a simple decision. Like, I just didn't think I could commit to doing everything required to be the player that I'd been, particularly over the previous 2 years. We'd been quite successful. There was part of me hoping that could go out with the dream and finish with back-to-back flags. That we got close, but that didn't eventuate. But it was just the right time. It felt right. Once I made the decision and chatted to Mick, like, it was a no-brainer. I've never thought about it ever again. Like, I've never regretted it. It was the right timing. It was the right decision, and yeah, I'm really comfortable with it. And after 12 years, it's a long period of your time, and there was some nerves and a bit of worry, I guess, about what's next. But that's all panned out okay. And yeah, I was really content with my decision, and we decided to announce it before the finals, and that way people knew that I was retiring, or knew I was retiring, and if there was some coaching jobs out there to join into or be considered for, that at least I knew my hat would be in the ring.
Yeah, absolutely. You alluded to it there. You did a bit of coaching before you wrapped up. So you were coaching it with the Calder Cannons while you were playing. What was it like to manage both of those at the same time, and also how you ended up at Gippsland Power?
Yep. So it was pretty easy to manage in terms of helping out Calder Cannons. They were fantastic. So Ian Kite was running the program up there at that time, and Marty Ellison was coaching, and they were just happy to have me join in and help out wherever I could. So I spent a fair bit of time just helping out the tools. Originally, it was sort of going to be go up once a fortnight or once every 3 weeks or whatever it might have been, but in the end, I was going up every week. I loved it. It was a bit of a drive out to Craigieburn, but I love getting out there, and I think it gave me a bit of a balance away from footy too. Probably, on reflection, it's probably the most consistently that I did something off the field in those last couple of years, and that's when I played my better footy. So maybe there is something to it, but I love getting out there. Working with Joe Dunner and Mitchell and Mitch Wallace and Liberatore and these sorts of guys who went on and played AFL footy. I was spending some time with these guys and trying to teach them a little bit, a few things here and there. Anton Grabak, who was overseeing the Vic Metro program at the time, he gave me a bit of a license, if you like, to have a bit of freedom. But he let me coach the Vic Metro under 17 team. They had 2 games, a couple of training sessions, and that's all it was. So he went and picked all the team and all those sorts of things, and he let me take training. And I think I rocked up to the game with half an hour to go after a recovery session. And for those guys, just to allow me to have that freedom and to back me in to have that experience, it certainly set me up. So they were really good. David Whedon was fantastic for me. I did his next coach program, and once again, we were supposed to catch up once a month, but we'll catch up weekly. And an hour conversation turned into 2 or 3 every week, and we're just talking about coaching. And and David's a really left of centre thinker, so we debated why you wouldn't be kicking torpedoes for goal still in AFL footy compared to the drop punt. And we'd debate that for half an hour and then have a coffee and keep going. But he was really, really good for me in terms of setting up the way I thought about footy and looking at it from different angles. Once I retired, Mark Neild went to Melbourne. Obviously worked really closely with Neildy when I was at Collingwood, and he was a line coach. He looked after midfield, and we had a really good relationship. He knew I understood the game plan roughly of what he was going to implement when he went across to Melbourne. So I went across and coached the forwards there. And then after Neildy obviously got let go, and Neil Craig took over, and then Paul Roos and Simon Goodwin took over. I didn't get my contract renewed, and the opportunity popped up at Gippsland Power, and for me it was a no-brainer to go back and work with Pete and back in the region, move back to home and all those sorts of things. It all added up at the time, and it was a great opportunity to go and learn and grow my coaching. And certainly it was a really good 5 years at Gippsland Power, and we had some really good kids come through.
Just if I could pick your brain there, you spoke about debating whether or not kicking torpedoes or drop punts for goal. Where does your mind sit at the moment with the statistics with the snapping is right in front of goal?
I don't like it. I'd rather him just go back and kick a drop punt. Like, I coached Harry Mackay at Gippsland Power, and Harry was a really good set shot for goal. I get really frustrated watching him snap around the corner, particularly from sort of 35 plus metres out from goal. Like, just go back and kick a drop punt. So, and I wasn't a great goal kicker. In 2009, I was really average, but improved it through practice and time and technique and getting a routine. So I'm pretty strong on the drop punt. I think, unless you're right on the boundary, but if you're going to snap, you got to be good at it. And you got to be consistent. It's got to be more consistent than your drop punt. So for me, as not a highly skillful player, I'd be going the drop punt every day of the week. But some of these guys are very good at the snaps, but not all of them.
Brando is our resident Carlton fan, so he gets to enjoy Harry going back and snapping right in front of goal every single week.
He's still got his hair though, so he obviously hasn't pulled it out yet.
It's kicking about all right. To Harry's credit, to be fair, the last few weeks before he got injured, he's been cleaning it up a little bit, but it gets frustrating to watch. Speaking of Harry, that 2015 Gippsland team is packed with names that went on to have quite good AFL careers. Obviously, you got Harry Mackay, Ben Mackay, Josh Dunkley, Tom Papley, and Anthony McDonald tipping Woody as well. What was it like to coach those names all in the 1 year and see the careers they've gone on to have?
Yeah, I didn't have Tipper, but
right.
Sam Skinner was in that one as well. And Sam went to Brisbane, then Port Adelaide, and unfortunately did his knee a few times. But I think, unless you're right on the boundary, it was a good crop. There was one a few years later. It was pretty good too with Flanders and Sarong and
Mhm.
Brock Smith and those sorts of guys. So, I was fortunate enough to have a couple of really good groups at Gippsland Power. Um, yeah, the Mackay boys are a good story. Like, I went to a training session in Warragul. It was a wet winter's night. These two tall kids are running around. It was wet. They were clunking everything. I reckon my phone was in the car, but I'd called Pete before I even got back in the car and said, why are these two kids not in on our program? So we did some research, and they'd shot up previously, and grown a fair bit. So they were in next year, and yeah, they played some super footy. They took a little bit of a different journey. So Harry came in and did the whole season, played Vic Country, and had a really good carnival there too. Whereas Ben stepped away for a little bit and then came back into our program a bit later. I think he enjoyed the attention that Harry was getting, and maybe the new boots and the managers coming around, and maybe a couple of tracksuits here and there. I think Ben enjoyed that part of it, so he jumped back in, but he was playing good footy at Warragul at that point, and Harry's interest had triggered everyone else's interest in Ben. Um, so I was just about to call Ben and say, "Hey, mate, are you wanting to come back in at this stage?" And I reckon it was just after the halfway point of our year, and he called me probably a day before I was thinking about calling him, and um, he said, "Can I come back in?" So we had that conversation, and he had a really good second half of the year. But Papley is an absolute star. He's one of my favourites. I love watching Paps, and um, he just does exactly what he does now, what he did at TAC level. Just a great small forward, full of energy, bit of a larrikin, can go in the midfield and have a real impact, but hits the scoreboard, and his front and centre works as good as I've ever seen. So, I love watching him. And Josh Dunkley's carved out a really good career. Like, he was father-son opportunity to go to Sydney, and he ends up at Western Bulldogs, wins a premiership in his first year, I think it was. Paps and Dunks played against each other in that grand final. And then, best and fairest winner before he's moved to Brisbane, having once again a really good season. So, and Sam Skinner, well, he was flying and did his knee in a game, Nationals over in Western Australia. Still got drafted to Brisbane, about to play his debut game, did a couple of extras on the training track, did his knee again, so he missed out. Then made his debut a little bit later and delisted and went to play Sandford and got redrafted to Port Adelaide. So a great story of perseverance and working under adversity and trying to get the best out of himself. And Sam's an unbelievable human, and he's been dealt a few cruel blows, but he made the best of what he got. And it was a really good group, really strong group, and unfortunately, he came up against some really strong Metro sides, and depending on when you get them in school footy and all those sorts of things. But we had a good time and a good group, and it's great to sit back and watch those guys play, as you do with all the guys that you coached along the journey.
Yeah, 100%. And just finally on your journey in the TAC Cup, further down the line, are you happy with leaving behind the impact that you've had on the competition, or is there a chance that you ever go back and coach at a club there?
I guess you never say never. So 5 years at Gippsland Power, a couple of years, well, a year and a bit at Vic Country, leading those guys, and then COVID hit, so I missed that opportunity to coach that group in the second year. So that would have been Jack Ginnivan, Ollie Henry, Seamus Mitchell, all these sorts of guys. So that's disappointing, but I understand. We all got thrown out of kilt when COVID hit. I made the decision to take my redundancy and move away from footy at that point. There'd just been too many changes, and I didn't like where it was headed and what it looked like. I took a big risk and stepped away, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And now, unfortunately, I landed in a job that's been fantastic, and I've got really good bosses who are understanding and look after me, and we all work hard together and trying to achieve something really good here. And I think I made the right decision. So I can't see myself going back to coach at that level, but never say never. I love coaching, and I love developing a young group, and why this time at Hayfield and get them back there right now. We've got such a young group. I reckon our average age is 21. We played a team on the weekend that's sitting top of the ladder and they belted us. And we've been travelling pretty well. We'll play finals and they belted us. But then you sit back and you look at it from a holistic point of view. Well, they've probably got an average of 5 or 6 years on us and the bodies are bigger. And, you sit back and you go, imagine what these boys can be doing in 5 or 6 years together if they can stick together. So, I still get a kick out of coaching and I still enjoy it. So, I love seeing these young kids improve and get better. And, fortunately, I've coached some of the boys on the AFL level and can watch them week to week. And on a weekend, I get to watch some of the local kids do the same thing and, do what they love as well. So I'll get a real kick out of that.
Mate, that is an incredible story. You're a fountain of stories. I could happily sit here and hear plenty of others, but unfortunately, that'll wrap our footy section. We can get through a few of these segments because we've already hit, I think, 70 minutes, and I feel like we could go another 70 with just some of the stories you've got. So we got three segments. We're about to debut a brand new one called Quick Thinking, which I'll let Brando run through in a minute. Then after that, we've got some quick fire questions, and then we've got a quiz at the end. So I'll sit you against Brando. The hosts are currently 0-2 against the guests, so we're hoping to get a win today.
You probably will against me, but we'll see how we go.
Brando, if you want to intro Quick Thinking, a brand new segment.
Brand new segment, Quick Thinking. So we've got a list of names for you, Lee. We'll run through them, and for each name, we just want you to give a one-word answer, the first word you think of for each name, and it's all people you've crossed paths with throughout your career. So
all right,
let's get rolling. I'll start off. Dane Swan.
Tattoos.
Dale Thomas.
Flair.
Boomer Harvey.
Small.
Nick Maxwell.
Sergeant.
Mick Malthouse.
Oh, Mick. Wow. I don't know if you can sum Mick up in one word. I think it's actually too hard. I don't think it's possible. You want to say grumpy, but he's not always grumpy. Like he's like an old fox.
Oh, I love that. Bob Murphy.
Funny. Absolute funny.
Wow. We got 2 in 1 here. Harry and Ben Mackay.
They're so different. Harry's more full of energy, and I reckon Ben's a bit more serious.
Josh Dunkley. Oh, that's it. Sorry, yeah. Josh Dunkley.
Professional.
Glenn Archer.
Hard.
Tony Modra.
Oh, freak. Absolute freak. I don't remember Mods ever training. I remember him off the goal, but I don't think I ever remember him training. He's still a bloody good player.
Alan Didak.
Oh, left foot wizard.
2 to go. Matthew Pavlich.
Big nose. He's got a big nose. You look at his side profile.
Oh, for sure.
Massive snoz on him.
And finally, we'll wrap it up with someone who has made his mark on the AFL and still going today, Scott Pendlebury.
He's just an absolute champion. He's the GOAT, isn't he? He's
unbelievable.
He's as good as we've seen for a long, long time.
Absolutely. God, that was incredible. Big nose might be the funniest part of this podcast so far.
It's the first time we've ever done this segment, and we're going to be hard pressed to find an answer better than that.
It's my favorite.
Unless we get another ex-Freo player who says the same thing.
They will. They probably will.
Oh, that's outstanding. So we'll go on to our next segment. It's one we've done already. It's going to be a common fixture. It's the quick fire question. So we've got a few easy questions here. You just rattle off your answers and we'll get underway. What's your favorite TV show?
Oh, Sons of Anarchy.
Good. Favorite movie of all time?
Happy Gilmore.
Very good.
That's a very good movie.
Very good answer. Go-to karaoke song?
No, I can't sing. Yeah, well, I actually can't sing, so I wouldn't even bother trying.
So what if we just say you're alone in the car? What's your favorite song to play?
It'd be something poppy, like it could be Taylor Swift or something like that. Like, yeah, it's got to have a little a bit of bounce in it.
A little bit of bounce, yeah. Very good. One question we ask every time. Thoughts on my favourite player, Tom De Koning?
Tom De Koning's a very good player. I think he should be number one ruck, and I think you just let him grow and evolve in the role, similar to what Western Bulldogs have done with Tim English across the journey.
Yeah. I think what we've seen with him recent weeks is under pressure, he's really flourished and made it known that, you know, he's got a spot in the team, which I love. But I could go on about him all day, but we won't do it. Which player was your hardest ever opponent?
Anthony Koutafidis, Matthew Pavlich.
Big nose.
Yeah, big nose. Yeah, they're probably the toughest two. But yeah, I've had some really hard battles against Brendan Favola and Fraser Garrick, Matty Lloyd, these sorts of guys. But yeah, I think Pav and Kuta were the toughest ones I've played on.
Yeah, and finally, this is the big question. We ask it every time. It's a big question amongst the group at House of Footy. Favorite flavour of shapes?
I don't eat any shapes.
Really?
Oh my word!
Yeah, I don't think you're going to get that answer again. But no,
That's
I don't eat any shapes. I hardly eat a biscuit, to be honest. And you wouldn't say that looking at me, but I don't eat any biscuits really.
Well, what we could do is we'll switch it to potato chips, and then we'll just take that answer. So, what's your favorite potato chip flavor?
Salt and vinegar.
Oh, well, it doesn't really relate to shapes at all, but we'll take it.
Yeah, I'm a bit of a plain Jane when it comes to food. I'm a bit stuck in my way.
No, salt and vinegar is good though.
When our last guest, we had Jason Ackermanis on, and when we asked him about his favorite flavor of shapes, he went on about cream buns. Do you like cream buns? Can we fill in here?
Well, I'm happy to have a cream bun, but yeah, not shapes for me. No shapes. No.
Fair enough.
Sorry, boys.
That's okay. That's okay.
Right. As long as you like the cream buns, Acker will be happy.
Yeah.
Okay. Now this is for us at least the most important part of this podcast. It is time for the hard tag quiz. We've pit you two against each other, and Brando, mate, I really need a win from you today.
Yeah. So I lost to Brad Ottens, and then Jacko lost to Acker. So
I did.
We got to go again. We got to get a win. So I'm counting on you to give it to me, Leigh.
So how many questions are there?
3 questions. So I'll start with. So the first question I'll ask, and then I'll get you to answer first. The second question, Brando will answer first, and the third one you'll answer first. So you have the advantage here.
Yeah. Okay.
So the very first question: how many disposals did you have in the drawn grand final?
Gee whiz.
I'll take closest to the pin here.
11.
11. Brando.
I was thinking around that mark. I'll say 10.
It was 13.
Oh, I just had to say 12.
That is a fun little tidbit. You actually had 13 in both the drawn and the replay.
Oh,
there you go.
Okay, so this one we might need to go back and forth here, and I might end up giving a few hints. So it's 1-0 to Leigh at the moment. Brando, I'm going to need you to go 2-0 here. Okay, let me just find this little tidbit. So, as we know, you kicked plenty of goals in your career, 138 across the time. Which team did you put the most goals on? Brando?
Wow. Have to be a team he played a lot against. So I'll start off and I'll say Geelong.
Ding, ding, ding.
Oh,
I would have given Leigh a shot there, but you picked Geelong straight on the nose. 16 against Geelong from 21 games.
I figured it'd be a team he played a lot against, and Geelong when he was at Collingwood.
Who was second? Essendon?
Western Bulldogs. Yeah, Western Bulldogs was actually second. Essendon was probably 4th or 5th. You put 12 on those guys.
Yeah, okay. I only say that because that's what I would have said, Essendon. But there you go, Geelong.
Awesome.
Okay, it comes down to the final question. So, you know, you're a utility. You played a lot of different roles. Pinch hit in the ruck at Collingwood a fair bit. What is the most amount of hit outs you had in a game?
Oh, wow.
I'll take closest to the pin again here.
The most amount of hit outs in a game. Let's say I'm just going to go with 11 again.
That sort of total always seems. All right, so this time I'm not going to make the mistake I did last time. I'm going to go above this time, and I'm going to say 12.
It was 12.
Yes,
We did it.
we did it.
Oh my gosh.
Thank you, Lee. You've given us our first win.
You get a little trophy or a medal or something, or
No, it's a
Should
moral
find
victory.
one.
It's a moral
just
victory.
a moral victory.
Just a
Yeah,
moral
I'll go-
Victory.
I'll go
We're still
solid.
down 2-1, but
We are still down 2-1. Oh
pegging
gosh.
back. We're pegging back, and that's what matters.
Okay. Thank you very much, Leigh Brown, for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast.
No worries, fellas. Thanks for having me.
Okay, that brings an end to episode 3 of The Hard Tag on House of Footy, the home of your footy fix. Thanks, Brando, for joining me again, mate.
Thank you.
We will be back next week. Make sure you click back to the House of Footy YouTube channel and find us on all your social platforms at House of Footy AU. See you next time.